Parents skipped my wedding because I got married before my perfect sister. Now relatives are refusing to attend my sister's expensive wedding, and my parents say I ruined their reputation. My folks skipped out on my wedding because I tied the knot before my so-called perfect sister. Now, people are bailing on her fancy wedding, and my parents are pointing the finger at me, saying I trashed their reputation. I'm 28, and I got married about 8 months back after being with my girlfriend for 4 solid years. Everyone showed up to celebrate, except my parents and my sister, who's 26. I can't say I was shocked about my sister blowing it off. She and I never really got along anyway. I still sent her an invite, more out of manners than hope. But my parents? That one stung. I didn't see that coming. It's always been clear they favored her over me. She's been the golden child at just about everything. Looks-wise, she fits the picture-perfect mold, too. I'm short and carry a little extra weight, while she looks like she walked straight out of a magazine shoot. I'm not even exaggerating. Back in college, she actually did some modeling jobs until her coursework took over. After graduating with her business degree, she landed a solid job at a big company and started climbing the ladder fast. She's young, gorgeous, successful, the kind of daughter parents love to brag about. And honestly, I get it. I can't really blame them. She's the one they can show off to the world. Me? I'm just kind of average all around. I don't say that to put myself down, just being real about it. I don't have her looks or her brain power. But even so, I'm content with the life I've built. When I was younger, it cut deep knowing my parents weren't as proud of me, that they never showed me the same kind of affection they showered on her. But eventually, I had to accept it. It wasn't like I had much choice. I tried everything as a kid to win them over, to be treated equally, but no matter what I did, I always came up short. It felt like they were obsessed with her, and nothing I did was ever going to measure up. At some point, I figured, why keep chasing their approval when all they'd ever do is hold me up against her? So I stopped trying. I started living for myself, and honestly, life got a whole lot lighter after that. I still kept in touch with my parents, though. I wasn't looking to start any family war. Plus, I knew they were all about appearances, and cutting them off would have turned into a huge spectacle. I didn't want that kind of drama, so I stayed connected on a surface level. Truth be told, they didn't seem to mind, since they had my sister to dote on. That's how things carried on for a couple years. Then, last year, I got engaged to my longtime girlfriend. I told my parents right away, invited them to everything, and, no surprise, they never showed. I can't say their absence ruined my wedding day, but it still felt strange. What really threw me off was they didn't even give me a reason. Plenty of guests noticed they weren't there. Nobody cared much about my sister skipping, since folks already knew she and I didn't get along. But my parents? That got people whispering. So a few days after the wedding, I decided to ask them straight out what was going on. Even before the ceremony, I tried calling them when I noticed they hadn't RSVP'd, but they ignored me. At the time, I brushed it off, figuring I already had enough on my plate. But once the wedding was over, I wanted answers. So I called them again. This time they actually picked up, which shocked me. I figured they'd keep stonewalling. Right off the bat, they said they were hurt, they couldn't attend, then claimed I never even bothered to send them an official invitation. I sat there completely dumbfounded, because I knew for a fact I had. My wife and I had triple-checked the guest list. We sent out physical invitations and digital ones, making sure everyone was covered. I knew they had gotten theirs. So hearing them accuse me of leaving them out felt off. While they went on about how insulted they felt, I quietly checked my list again, and sure enough, their names were right there. That's when it hit me. They weren't being forgetful, they were trying to gaslight me. Still, I didn't argue. I just apologized, played along, and hung up. Inside, though, I was fuming. They had purposely skipped my wedding, then turned around and tried to make it my fault. Later, I told my wife about the whole call, and she said exactly what I was too stubborn to admit, that my parents were angry I got married before my sister. They wanted her to go first, and when I didn't wait around, they made excuses. The fake, "we never got an invite" story was just their way of dodging responsibility. At first, I brushed off my wife's theory, but then she reminded me of the way my parents acted when I told them I was engaged. They didn't sound excited at all. Looking back, it makes perfect sense. When I first called to tell my parents about the engagement, they looked shocked. At the time, I figured it was just because I'd bothered to call at all, since things between us were always cold. I only phoned them before posting on social media because I thought it was my duty as their son, and honestly, I wanted to be polite. So I assumed that was why they looked surprised, that I even cared enough to tell them directly. But later, my wife explained that she could see right away they weren't happy about it. She said the look on their faces wasn't joy or surprise, it was disappointment. She didn't mention it back then because she didn't want to stress me out while I was already neck deep in wedding planning. Still, she noticed other things too. At the engagement party, my parents sat off in a corner, sulking instead of mingling with everyone else. At one point, when my wife went over just to be polite, she caught them on the phone with my sister. She could even hear my sister crying on the other end while they tried to comfort her. You don't need to be a detective to put that together. Even though my wife couldn't make out exactly what my sister was saying, it wasn't hard to figure out why they weren't happy about my engagement. And the moment they noticed she was standing close by, they quickly hung up and switched on fake smiles. But by then, the damage was done. She'd already seen enough. When my wife told me all this after the wedding, I was surprised at first, but honestly, it made everything click into place. She admitted she hadn't said anything earlier because she didn't want me anxious while juggling wedding prep. Looking back, though, it explained perfectly why my parents skipped the big day. It was never about not getting an invitation. I had double and triple checked that. They just didn't want to face the fact I got married before their favorite daughter. That was the breaking point for me. After my wedding, I decided I wasn't going to talk to them anymore, not even for the sake of keeping up appearances. I'd had enough. If my sister was all they cared about, then fine, they could have her. Fast forward to just a couple weeks ago, and I hear through the grapevine that my sister got engaged. She'd been dating some guy for about a year, he proposed, and she said yes. Good for her, honestly. I didn't think much of it, but I knew my parents would go all out. And sure enough, they started bragging online and with their friends about how huge this wedding was going to be. Big venues, pricey decorations, you name it. My sister even bragged to our cousins that she'd be shopping at Bureauang. It was clear they were sparing no expense. I was minding my own business, not paying it much thought, until a couple of days ago my parents suddenly reached out to me. They accused me of trying to ruin my sister's wedding. I had no idea what they were talking about. I told them flat out I hadn't said anything and that I didn't even care. We hadn't spoken in ages, and fighting with them was the last thing I wanted. But they insisted I'd been trash-talking the family ever since my wedding, and that they were very disappointed in me. According to them, a bunch of relatives had already made excuses not to attend the engagement party, and some even hinted they wouldn't be at the wedding. And of course, they blamed me. They said my sister had confided in a cousin that I'd been telling everyone the real reason my parents skipped my wedding, that they wanted her to be married first, because she's the prettier, more successful one. My parents accused me of dragging their name through the mud, and now, because of that, the family wanted nothing to do with her wedding. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong. After my wedding, when relatives asked why my parents didn't show, I told them exactly what I thought. I was hurt and angry, and after hearing what my wife had seen, I didn't feel like covering for them anymore. So whenever a family member asked, I told the truth. I didn't sugarcoat it. To me, that wasn't gossip, it was honesty. If my parents cared so much about their reputation, maybe they should have thought about that before skipping their own son's wedding just to protect my sister's feelings. I figured people deserve to know. So I told them about the phone call with my parents, about how they claimed they never got an invitation, and about what my wife had witnessed at the engagement party. I didn't make it dramatic. I just said it plainly, in passing. But I guess word traveled. When I talked to my relatives about my parents skipping the wedding, I wasn't trying to make it sound like I wanted pity, but I also didn't sugarcoat anything. I just told it how I saw it. What I didn't realize was how fast word would spread. Before long, just about everyone in the family knew that my parents skipped out because they didn't want my sister feeling bad, that she was their top priority, and that afterward they even tried to gaslight me into believing I had forgotten to invite them. I never told them this directly, but now most of my relatives have made it clear they don't want anything to do with my parents or my sister's wedding. The cousin who passed this info along to my sister had been eavesdropping on me for a while. She's a big gossip, so it doesn't shock me one bit that she ran straight to my sister and parents with what she heard. Honestly, I think she just wanted to stir the pot. And boy, did she get what she wanted. My parents are furious. They're convinced I sabotaged them on purpose, that I'm jealous of my sister, and that I spread these so-called rumors just to make them look like villains. They even went so far as to say my wife made up the whole story about overhearing them at the engagement party, and they accused me of leaving them off the guest list intentionally, just so I could play the victim and collect sympathy from relatives. I don't buy that for a second. I trust my wife completely. She told me the truth. And I know for a fact those invitations were sent out. What does bother me a little, though, is realizing my words did influence how people saw things. Because of what I shared, relatives started backing away from my sister's big day. Still, from my perspective, I was just being honest. So am I the bad guy here for telling the truth about why my parents didn't show up to my wedding? The truth is, my sister and I never got along, not even as kids. The biggest reason is simple. She's always tried to put me down. It wasn't enough that our parents clearly favored her. She wanted me to feel that sting every single day. I'll never understand why. Growing up, she was the straight A student, the athlete, the popular one. Everybody could see she was more successful than me. That should have been enough for her. But instead, she went out of her way to rub it in with little digs and snarky comments. She had her little posse too, kids younger than me, who'd follow her lead and try to bully me. I was older, so I never took them too seriously. At worst, they were just annoying gnats buzzing around. Not worth the fight. But I honestly thought that once we got older, she'd outgrow that nonsense. Turns out, I was wrong. Even as adults, she kept at it. Jokes at my expense, jabs in front of other people, constant digs. It got to the point where I just stopped showing up. I'm not the kind of guy who enjoys confrontation, and I don't like being around people I don't trust or respect. So I just started avoiding her altogether. For the past couple of years, I've only bothered going to family events when I absolutely had to. If it was something small, I stayed home. It was easier that way. That's why I don't have regrets about distancing myself from her. When we were kids, I really did try to build a bond, but eventually you realize some people just aren't worth the effort, even if they share your blood. That's the same realization I had with my parents more recently. The only reason I hung on to those relationships for so long, despite all the pain, was because they were the only family I had. Sure, I've got relatives, but it's not the same as having parents who actually stand by you. Funny thing is, now I see it differently. These days, my relatives feel more like my real family than my parents or sister ever did. Update 1. After reading through people's comments and really thinking it over, I decided to just cut off contact with my parents. They've been blowing up my phone with messages, but I realized I didn't have anything to feel guilty about. All I did was tell the truth about my wedding and their behavior. That's not sabotage, that's honesty. When I finally replied, I kept it simple and told them the same thing I'd told everyone else. That's when they launched into a whole argument, claiming I'd done it on purpose because I've always been jealous of my sister. We ended up talking over the phone, and before I answered, I told myself this time I wasn't holding back. I'd been bottling it up for years, and I needed to let it out. So when they accused me of being jealous, I just said, yeah, I am. But I explained it wasn't because of her looks or her achievements. I've never cared about that stuff. What I've always been jealous of is the fact that my own parents never once treated us equally. They always put her ahead of me. I can understand the rest of the world preferring her. She is prettier. She is more accomplished. But my parents? That's what cut the deepest. And I'm tired of pretending like it doesn't matter. Things like that stick with you. Being told you should just shrug it off and act like it's fine. It's not realistic. That expectation alone feels unfair. But I did that, just because I always expected that at some point, my parents would start appreciating me for who I am. But that never happened. And even when I was not trying, I was still subconsciously trying to get them to appreciate me somehow. That's why I had kept my mouth shut about their terrible treatment of me for so many years. But now, when I was finally speaking up, they had an issue with it just because it was making them look back. Well, tough, because if they really think the truth is making them look bad, then maybe they are the problem in the situation and not me. If they wanted to come off as good parents, then maybe they should have just been good parents, and then I would only have wonderful things to say about them. But they had handed this ammunition to me themselves, so now they have no right to complain about me, making them look bad. If I wanted you to tell my relatives how I had been treated by my parents, how they had always chosen my sister over me, and make a big deal out of it, then I definitely would do that. They had already accused me of playing the victim and seeking sympathy, so fine, maybe I was doing exactly that. Instead of calling me again and again, trying to get me to go back on my word, maybe they should just try talking to my relatives and convince them that they are not the kind of people that I made them out to be. Maybe that would be a more productive use of their time, but talking to me would not get them anywhere because I've already said whatever I had to say, and if my relatives have chosen to believe me, then good for me. The bottom line was that I was not going to fix the situation for them. I'm not responsible for anybody else's reputation apart from mine. My parents just went silent, probably because they were not used to this kind of behavior from me, since I had already mentioned that I'm a non-confrontational person and I'm also pretty quiet and introverted. So an outburst like this was not something that I had expected. They had probably thought that I was just going to let this slide as well, but I was done letting them walk all over me in the expectation that maybe they would appreciate me at some point. But after a couple of seconds, my parents told me that since I had already decided that they were terrible parents and I had such strong opinions on their failure to raise me the same way that they had raised my sister, they had decided that maybe it was time to let me go. So far, they had been expecting me to fix the situation because they thought that I was family. They thought that I was their daughter, so I would at least be concerned about it. But very obviously, I was happy that they were suffering. So now, they told me, they had no expectations from me, and I was free to lead my life the way that I wanted to. They would not bother me ever again. They ended their little speech by telling me that at the end of the day, both of us were their daughters, Maybe I just felt like they had always preferred my sister over me because I was the insecure one, but that was not their fault, and I shouldn't blame them for it. So even in the end, they just couldn't accept that a part of this was their fault. They wanted me to be the bad guy. It took a lot of effort for me to keep my mouth shut, but then I just didn't say anything because I knew that again with them was just going to be pointless and I didn't want to end up talking in circles. So if they wanted to make me the villain, that was completely fine with me. At least that would get them off my back. But now that I've gotten my point across, I've spoken to them about how I felt all these years. I feel a lot lighter and much better. Now whatever happens with my sister's wedding or whatever, I really don't care about it. That's their problem to deal with. I'm just going to do my thing. Update 2. Hey, a couple of days ago, I had that conversation with my parents and today, my sister reached out to me and sent me a text saying that whatever I had said to my parents, it was really wrong and they were very upset about it. After all, they had raised me. They had done everything for me as parents, and now, I couldn't just turn around and tell them that they hadn't been good enough because that was really ungrateful of me. She was acting all holier than thou, and I knew that she was just loving this opportunity to lord it over me, pretending to be the epitome of grace and dignity, when she was anything but that. It really annoyed me, so I didn't even reply to the text, I just blocked her. I thought that would be good enough, but then, a couple of hours later, my husband called me and told me that he had received a text from an unknown number, and sure enough, it was my sister texting her. She had basically just told him the same things, and then told him that he needed to convince me to apologize to our parents because what I was doing was really wrong, and since he's part of the family now, he can't just sit on the sidelines like a spectator and let things like this go on, especially when it's making me look like a complete fool. I was furious that she had had the audacity to text my husband, but my husband found it very funny. He thought that it was hysterical that my family actually thought that texting him and telling him to make me apologize was going to work. And because of him, I was kind of able to find it funny as well, and otherwise, I really would have gone all out. In the past couple of days, I haven't really told anybody about what's been going down with my parents, because I haven't had the time to speak to most people since I've been quite busy with work. But then, if anybody asks me or if I run into anyone, I'm going to be very open with them because I'm sure that that's the thing that's going to make them most upset. I'm not usually big on gossiping, but if this is making my parents unhappy, then I'm all for it. And the best part is that it's not even gossiping. I'm just telling them my side of things, and I don't even have to make anything up. I just have to tell them how they actually behave, and that's bad enough for people to dislike them. The funniest part of all of this is that even though they already know that I'm not going to be holding back anymore, neither am I going to be protecting the reputation of the family by staying silent. They're still going out of their way to make things worse for themselves by pulling off these stunts. Update 3. Hi. So it's been a couple of weeks since my last update and my parents have started telling everybody in the family that apparently I've been spreading false rumors about them to make them look bad, just because I was jealous of my sister and I wouldn't be able to stand it if people actually attended her wedding since it was going to be so much grander and extravagant than mine. I was pretty sure they thought that this strategy was going to work, making me look like the bad guy and stuff. But most of the people from our family had already decided that they wanted to be on my side. And to be honest, I don't even have to try. They already felt like my parents indulged my sister too much, right from when we were kids. So my version of things was a lot more believable to them than whatever my parents were trying to get them to believe. So instead of just taking their word for it, they actually told me about what my parents had been saying about me behind my back, and in short, their whole plan backfired because now, people are laughing at them and their stupidity with me. This is karma at its best, and I'm really glad that they chose to show their true colors to everyone.